From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for the Red Zone and the Orange Alert. Guys, we are combining our weekly look at Oklahoma and Oklahoma State football because it's Bedlam Week. We do everything together this week. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OSU beat writer Scott Wright, OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Guys, it is Bedlam on Saturday, 2:30 kick down in Norman, ABC, and this is a game that Oklahoma's favored in by quite a bit, whether you're making lines in Vegas or you're sitting in an office somewhere here in the state of Oklahoma. Most people expect Oklahoma to win this, but Barry, let's start with you. This is a series where the unexpected often happens. The favorite isn't always the easy winner in these games.
Well, I mean, it's a kooky series, just the series record. I mean, Oklahoma's domination of this series historically is nonsense. To be that lopsided, and here in the golden age of OSU football, or the Mike Gundy era, you know, they've been one of the top 10 winningest programs of the last decade. OSU's winning percentage in Bedlam has gone down under Mike Gundy. It just makes no sense. But what's kooky is OSU is just as likely to win when they're a massive underdog as they are when they're favored. They've been favored 4 times this century. They've lost 3 of those games. They've won twice when they've been 19-point underdogs or higher. So you never know what's going to happen. That makes it fun, but it's historically it's crazy, the lopsided nature of this series.
We'll drill down into some of the more specific points of this game, but let's talk about what it would take for an upset first with the Cowboys, and then we'll talk about what the Sooners can do to avoid that. But Scott, when you think big picture about OSU scoring an upset down in Norman on Saturday, what are those top line things that they have to do?
Well, it all starts with the defense, because they're not going to be able to just line up and outscore Oklahoma. They've got to get a few key stops. They're probably not going to be able to get enough to say hold Oklahoma in the 30s or even maybe the 40s, but they've got to get enough stops, get the offense the ball back, and put the ball in the end zone. They can't be settling for field goals. They're going to have to score touchdowns and get some stops on defense. It all comes down to containing Kyler Murray whenever he wants to run. In particular, we've seen that be a damaging threat for Oklahoma State's defense. So that will be a big factor for the Oklahoma State defense, and then just that defense getting off the field is going to be the biggest thing. All
right, defense on the OSU side to score the upset. Ryan, to avoid the upset, what's Oklahoma have to do?
Well, the same thing, defense. Make a few stops. I mean, Oklahoma's defense looked really good for a couple weeks after Mike Stoops' firing against TCU, against Kansas State. They struggled at times against Texas Tech, although I think maybe some of the numbers were a little bit misleading given the 2 turnovers early. They were able to get a couple of those key stops, but they're going to need some of them in this game. They're going to have to play better overall on that side of the ball, not just for this game, but moving forward. You know, it comes down, and we'll talk more about defense in a second, as I mentioned, but Barry, when you look at the lopsided nature of this rivalry, that Oklahoma, even, you know, as we talk about the wackiness of some of these results, when you go into games thinking it's going to go one way, it may end up the other. But in the end, the total, when you look at this series, is way swung towards Oklahoma. So why is it that even when you have sort of classic games and unexpected close calls or upsets, that Oklahoma still owns such a decisive advantage in this series?
Well, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't be sharing it with you. I would put it in a bottle and sell it to Mike Gundy, who is well equipped to pay me a princely wage for that information. I can only guess, and here's what I guess. You know, for a long time, the Sooners were dominant anyway. I mean, they had the better program by a long ways, had a huge talent margin. In recent years, that has sort of gotten closer. In the 90s, OU fell back. OSU started getting closer, so in the early 2000s, they were pretty close. In the last 10, 12 years, OSU's really increased their talent base and their success rate. What's happened to OSU, though, is the Sooners have gotten more serious about Bedlam. There was a time when I'm not sure Oklahoma cared that much about the Bedlam series. I don't know that the players thought it was a huge game. Certainly the fans didn't, and they still had the talent to go ahead and win. Here in recent years, it's become closer. The fans still very slow to say OSU's a big game. They don't really want to admit that. But what's happened in the last 10 years, the biggest game on OU's schedule from a conference standpoint has clearly been Bedlam. It's not even a debate, much more than, say, Texas. And the players know that. The players realize that. I think the Sooner players get serious about Bedlam every year. And that's been to OSU's detriment because, generally speaking, when you're talking about a historically dominant, you know, the underdog might have the motivational edge. Hadn't really occurred in the Bedlam series.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. Ryan, your beat partner today, Joe Masato, had a story about the lacking Oklahomans that are on the Oklahoma roster. As we look at it, only 3 will start. A few more will play in reserve roles. But to Barry's point, even with those smaller Oklahoma born and bred numbers on the Sooner roster, this series, it sounds like, may have swung, and it doesn't matter if you're from California or, you know, Washington, D.C. You know this is a big game.
Yeah, and Barry talked about the fans of this series of Oklahoma not really taking, I don't know if they don't take Oklahoma State seriously, if you would say it like that, but not believing this is a big rivalry game. Well, the players who have grown up elsewhere, who don't live in that environment and see sort of the dismissiveness at times, they've seen the Bedlam rivalry from afar and have seen how big it is, and as far as Big 12 race, as far as Oklahoma's national title hopes, and they get invested in it, I think, maybe much quicker than they used to.
Scott, from an OSU perspective, Barry mentioned, you know, these are really the salad days for Oklahoma State football. You know, some of the best results they've ever had, extended period of success. But Mike Gundy has not won consistently against Oklahoma. Is there some pressure on him? Do you sense that at all in this Bedlam rivalry?
Well, there certainly is. You can tell that a little bit by the reaction to his comments during his press conference on Monday with when he was asked, why have you struggled against OU? And he basically steps back and almost in a joking manner says, they're pretty good. Have you watched them? And a lot of fans didn't care too much for that reaction. So yeah, you've got to think that there is some pressure. Mike Gundy understands that Oklahoma is one of those programs on that mantle that he's wanting to build toward, and you know the things that he talks about wanting to do with this program are things that Oklahoma has done already, and so he knows that that's one of the targets that he's shooting for. He just hasn't been able to put a team together on a regular basis to go out there and pull off victory. So you definitely got to think that there is some pressure, and even though Mike Gundy is not going to show it, you know he's going to be more relaxed about it with the media. He's going to make jokes about his brother and those sorts of things. But there definitely is a lot of outside curiosity and consternation about why Oklahoma State can't take a step forward in this series.
Well, if they're going to take a step forward, if they're going to score the upset, quarterback play is likely to be a big part of that. So let's transition over. Let's talk about Taylor Cornelius to start with, Scott. He has a lot of fans, speaking of consternation, had some consternation about Taylor Cornelius. He has been up and down. There's been inconsistencies. But what does he have to do in this game against Oklahoma to really help his team score that upset?
Well, it's just consistency. It's exactly what you said. So he's got to be making plays. You know, he really hasn't turned the ball over a lot lately. He's been good in that, but he's been missing some of the easier throws. At Baylor was a little bit tricky because there was a pretty strong wind that was kind of swirling around in McLean Stadium, made it tough to especially throw deep. But for the most part, his decision making has been good. He's got to make the throws. They need a little bit of help from the offensive line to get the run game going in particular. If he can continue making good decisions, he's probably going to find some opportunities to run the ball, and he's been picking and choosing his opportunities to do that, and has been pretty successful. His rushing numbers, when you take out the sacks, are really pretty consistently good. So that's going to be a big part of it. But you know, staying consistent, moving the chains, not making massively bad decisions that are going to send you back and put you in bad situations. Those are going to be the things that he's got to do to keep the ball moving. And they've got to put the ball in the end zone. They can't, as I said again, can't settle for field goals. They've missed 4 of their last 6 with Matt Amendola having been really consistent and suddenly hitting a rough stretch. So they've got to score touchdowns on Saturday. You
know, you mentioned not really turning the ball over, Taylor Cornelius, and we hadn't seen that out of Kyler Murray until last week at Texas Tech, and then it came in bunches, which was frankly really surprising, Ryan. He didn't do it after those first 2, but to do it at all seemed crazy. What about Kyler Murray's play? I mean, he's been so consistent. When you have anything like that, it almost feels like, you know, you're seeing something you know, unexpected, aliens landing, if you will. I mean, what does he have to do in this game?
Well, the same thing he's done for most every series that they played this season, except for those two and the big interception he threw against Texas. Protect from turning the ball over. Oklahoma's weapons around him: CeeDee Lamb, Marquise Brown, Trey Sermon. That offensive line. You throw Grant Calcaterra in that lately. Lee Morris. They're going to be able to score some points, and that's on top of what Kyler Murray can do with his feet. They're going to be able to score some points. So if Oklahoma is able to avoid turnovers, then they should be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the quarterback run aspect of things, because that adds to the whole run game for both teams a lot. But Barry, it's interesting as we talk about Kyler Murray, as we talk about Taylor Cornelius. A year ago, we had Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph. They had played against each other 3 straight years in Bedlam. Mason Rudolph had played a 4th year as a true freshman in that big upset in 14. Historic quarterbacks in terms of just their impact on the program. Now this year, we have essentially 2 one-year guys. I mean, nobody at OU wants to say Kyler Murray's a one-year guy, but he's a one-year guy. And 2 guys, though, that are really perceived differently. I mean, while last year was intriguing because of the longevity of it, this year's intriguing in a whole different way.
Well, yeah, and it's striking the difference between the season arc of Kyler Murray and Cornelius. One of these guys is a Heisman Trophy finalist and was anointed the starting quarterback, 10 days before kickoff, and the coach says this is a really close race. If Austin Kendall is almost as good as Kyler Murray, I'm going to fall out in the floor when I see it next autumn. That's a phenomenal statement. Meanwhile, Mike Gundy says just out of the blue, oh yeah, Cornelius in July. Yeah, Cornelius is our quarterback. He's by far the best. And he's lived by that. To Grundy's credit, he's stuck by corn dog no matter what. So it's strange. I think Cornelius has gotten a bad rap most of the year. He's not been a superstar. He's not Mason Rudolph, but he's been a pretty good quarterback. OSU's offense has performed at a fairly high level, not a championship level, but certainly a good, solid level. The defense has just disintegrated and caused all kinds of problems. But nobody wants to talk about the defense. They want to talk about corn dog. Meanwhile, Kyler Murray's just, he's followed in the footsteps. He's like Godfather 2. Somehow he's better than the sequel, than the original. Who could have thought? So it's a remarkable story in both regards. And, it's too bad that Cornelius doesn't get another year, because he's clearly got some things you can build around. And it's too bad Kyler Murray can't be another year, because for crying out loud, he's as good as Baker Mayfield. If
we don't use Godfather 2 in some sort of photo illustration of Kyler Murray, unleash our guy Jeff Patterson, who does our covers on that. We've missed the boat, guys.
Heisman Trophy preview.
Okay, all right. Everybody put that in your memory banks. All right, we're right here making plans. I mentioned the running, or you guys mentioned the running capability of these 2 quarterbacks. And Ryan, let's start with you, because OSU has struggled with running quarterbacks, even guys that, may not have shown nearly the running capability of Kyler Murray. But Murray's been really selective in how he uses his feet. And then you expand it more to their run game and what they're asking of Trey Sermon and what he's delivering. That run game, as good as their pass game's been, the run game's been phenomenal this year.
Yeah, it has. They haven't had many chances to just flat out just show off their running game, but they were able to do that in the 4th quarter against Texas Tech, as they had a little bit of a lead and they had to grind out the game, and they did it with Trey Sermon. Kyler Murray had a couple big runs as well. So Kyler Murray's just been fantastic running. Not only his speed, which we all see, he's the fastest player on the field, especially since Marquise Brown has gotten dinged up a little bit, but the decision-making that we see from him, his ability to feel pressure around him. He avoids big hits for the most part. He's able to slide, and I know everybody attributes that to baseball, but it's a little bit different when you got 250, 350-pound guys bearing down on you versus a shortstop or a second baseman. The feel that he's got for that is just incredible, and he's been able to stay on the field because of that, and he's been able to make some really big plays for them because of it.
Scott, Jim Knowles has not hidden the fact that OSU has struggled against running quarterbacks, but their big success against Texas came when they allowed some of those linebackers to drop back a little bit, to be more in coverage. How do they manage this when you've got the passing threat that Oklahoma throws out there, but clearly they can run the ball if you don't leave some guys in the box? How does OSU balance that challenge?
Yeah, that's the really tough thing, because you're already looking at a team that's that only puts 6 guys in the box from a technical standpoint. With that 4-2-5, only 2 linebackers on the field. So you're already at a disadvantage in that scenario, or bringing up a safety like Malcolm Rodriguez to come in and help. Malcolm Rodriguez has been fantastic. He's one of the team's leading tacklers lately, number 2 overall behind Justin Phillips. Phillips is a guy who's got to be solid in the middle and kind of patrol that area. But at the same time, you've got to have guys like Calvin Bunnage, who are going to end up in coverage on occasion and having to come up and help, or blitzing the quarterback, the different things that he likes to do. So a lot of the creative things that Jim Knowles likes to do are sort of counteracted by the talent that Oklahoma has with what Murray can do when plays break down, or just by running the power run game with Trey Sermon. So it's a really kind of a tightrope that Jim Knowles is going to be walking on, with all the different things that he likes to do with this defense.
Barry, I see you reacting as Scotty's talking. I don't know what's going through your head, but what's going through your head?
Well, I was actually off subject. I was just thinking about how these guys are dressed, like we didn't get the memo.
Well, you're glad at least.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I was supposed to dress like them or if we were supposed to coordinate. I don't know what's going on, but good solid. Everybody's got good solid Bedlam neutral colors.
Yeah.
Though there's no red, no orange, no anything.
None of that.
So we're good. We're good.
You know, as you were talking, Scott, about defending what Murray and the pass game can do from Oklahoma, I'm thinking of the same thing for the Oklahoma defense, Ryan, because, I mean, Taylor Cornelius, even though he's been he's been inconsistent throwing the ball, but he can run the ball. 6'6", 250, 245. He's a guy that presents a challenge in the run game that's different, and then you add in Justice Hill and Chuba Hubbard. What is the challenge for Oklahoma's defense? Because they're going to have to face off with Tylan Wallace and Tyron Johnson. Those receivers, much like Oklahoma State's going to have to handle, you know, CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown. How does Oklahoma's defense adjust?
Well, I think a big part of it is how well those defensive ends especially are going to be able to contain Taylor Cornelius, keep him in the pocket, don't let him run, give their secondary not as much time to have to cover those guys like Wallace and the other Oklahoma State receivers. They've been inconsistent. There's no doubt about it. In the first half against Texas Tech, pressure was absolutely non-existent. They didn't get any on Alan Bowman, and we saw Bowman just pick them apart. The second half, even with the quarterback change, so we're finally able to start getting some pressure. We saw Neville Gallimore get a big sack. I think guys like Ronnie Perkins, Kenneth Mann, Jalen Redmond, who has been a bigger and bigger part of this defense the last few weeks, those guys are going to be really key in slowing down Oklahoma State's run game, especially with Taylor Cornelius. But Oklahoma's been pretty solid against the run. I mean, we saw what they did against Alex Barnes a couple weeks ago. They've been able to contain those guys to this point this year. We'll see if they're able to do it on Saturday.
You know, Barry, when you look at these two defenses, I mean, beleaguered is, it seems like a strong word, but I think it fits because, you know, you talk about Oklahoma going to Tech last week, and everybody says, well, there's no way you can see a repeat of what we saw 2 years ago. It nearly happened. If Alan Bowman doesn't have that collapsed lung reoccur, we could have been looking at similar numbers. Oklahoma State has had struggles with all sorts of different types of offenses. Is this, we saw a huge offensive output last year in Bedlam. Are we going to see a similar type of game this year with just the offenses going crazy?
I think it's possible. I really do. I mean, OSU has not shown any propensity to stop somebody like Kyler Murray. Nobody else has. Nobody has, so I don't know why OSU would. OSU's offense has had a couple of down games. They weren't good against Tech, weren't good against K-State. They were really good against Texas and really good against Iowa State, who are solid defenses. So, I mean, I think the Cowboys can put up some numbers. They're going to have to stay in the game. You're not going to hold Oklahoma to 31 points. You can't try to beat them 34-31. You're going to have to try to beat them 55-49. So, I think it's possible. Both teams have big play potential. I mean, Justice Hill can hit home runs. Tylan Wallace can hit home runs. We know OU can hit home runs. So that's how games get out. Even if offenses are dominant, if they'll just take 4 or 5 minutes to score, that'll hold the score down. But if you take 45 seconds to score, all of a sudden you're creating opportunities for future points. And that could happen on Saturday.
All right, before we get to picks, I'm going to throw you guys a curveball here because that leads us nicely into picks. But give me an X factor. We've talked about quarterbacks. We've talked about beleaguered defenses, the running backs. who is a guy that maybe we're not, looking at real closely, but Ryan, who could you see maybe being an X factor for the Sooners?
Well, for me, it's safety Robert Barnes. I mean, we saw the big play that he made last week with the 2-point conversion return all the way the other way to help sway that game back in Oklahoma's favor. But he's been pretty good against the pass, but he's also been a much bigger part of their run defense the last few weeks. And I think when you talk about slowing down Taylor Cornelius, when you talk about slowing down Justice Hill, and having a part in helping that secondary manage Oklahoma State's passing game, Robert Barnes, to me, who broke into the starting lineup after Ruffin McNeil was put in place as the interim defensive coordinator, he's a guy who has a chance to make a big impact on this defense.
What about it from the Cowboys side, Scotty?
I'm going with the guy that I mentioned earlier with Calvin Bundage. He's a guy that's does a lot of different things. He can end up in coverage. He can end up blitzing the quarterback. He can end up in run coverage. So, but he's a guy who also has a tendency he's been unshackled by Jim Knowles' defense. They let him go and try to make plays. And sometimes that leads to him getting out of position. You can look at a couple of times when Charlie Brewer of Baylor was able to get out of the pocket and scramble. It was to Calvin Bundage's side. So you've got to be able to maintain your assignment and stay where you're supposed to be against Kyler Murray to not allow those things to happen. But Calvin Bundage is a big play guy on this defense. They need him making plays. He's ever since the injury against Texas Tech, he's been slow to get back to what he was at the beginning of the season. Now they need that guy that is really their most dynamic, I think, defensive playmaker to be that guy on Saturday.
All right, Barry, I'm going to give you a chance to give me two X factors. Since you're a columnist, you don't cover either team. Give me one on the OU side, one on the OSU side.
On OSU, it's Calvin Bundage Boulevard. I'm going to go with Jordan Brailford. Here's OSU's really their only chance to win this game is make Kyler Murray throw some interceptions. He's only thrown 5 all year. 2 against Texas, 2 against Tech. Tight games, big games, keep it close. Not that it was close against Tech, it was the first 5 minutes of the game. But put a little pressure on Kyler Murray, see if he'll throw you the ball. And the way you do that is get to him and contain him and make him throw the ball. A couple of turnovers would go a long way to keeping OSU in this game. On the Sooner side, I think it's Pernell Motley. They're going to play him. He's a big play guy. But the Cowboys have a big edge on the cornerback wide receiver matchup. Wallace and Tyron Johnson are just better, more productive players than what OU's lining up at corner with Motley and maybe Norwood. Trey Brown's playing really well. But whoever Motley's on, Cowboys are going to pick on him. Can they get some big plays off that matchup?
Every X factor on the defensive side. Really interesting that would be the case. We know that if a defense, I think whoever said it first, a stop or two could really be a determining factor in this game. All right, let's get to picks, guys. Ryan, let's start with you. You've got OU. You've got them 58-48. You've got kind of a track meet going.
Yeah, I think there's no reason to think that this isn't going to be a high-scoring game because of all the problems that we talked about with both of these defenses, how high-powered these offenses can be, especially Oklahoma's. I think the Sooners are able to get that stop or two that puts them over the edge. I think it's going to be a close game into the fourth quarter, but Oklahoma comes out ahead.
Scotty's got a 1-to-60 score, 65-35. Lots of points there, Scotty.
I don't know. You might have us reversed. I think there's
we had some issues,
some technical difficulties.
Don't go by that.
All right, never mind. Okay.
I've got 58-48.
Okay, all right.
But
okay.
I think so. Everything Aber just said about it, that's what I think is going to happen.
I think mine was like 55-38 or something.
Okay, well, there I see that score there too.
Which is pretty close. It's not too far removed.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
All right.
But yeah, I think that Oklahoma State can keep themselves in this late, and I think that they stay within that 17.5-point spread or whatever it ends up being on Saturday. But I think Oklahoma just has too many weapons for them to put it away for good.
All right, Barry, I have no idea what your pick is because I'm apparently looking at a chart that isn't correct. So
I am Mr. 65-35.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be points through the roof. And I just don't see any way OSU can stop them. OU can run like Kansas State and can throw like Tech. I don't know how you stop somebody like that. Nobody has. Certainly not OSU. Cowboy defense has been pretty putrid all season. So I think Kyler Murray and gang are going to run up and down the field, and it's incumbent upon the Cowboys to match them, to stay in the game. I'm going a big score.
I've got OU winning, but after what you guys told me, I don't know if this is the score that I picked in print or not.
You're right.
52-31, I think that's what I picked.
Yeah, no,
but
you're right. Yours is right on there.
Okay, I'll stick with that. And for a lot of the reasons you guys are saying. I mean, I just think that you're likely to see Oklahoma move the ball. We're going to see both of them move the ball. But I just think that Oklahoma's got some advantages. They'll be able to take advantage of those, get a few stops here and there. But again, I'll go back to what we said at the beginning. This has been a kooky series. There's been crazy things happen, so we'll see. You never know. I'd like to write about an entertaining, fun game that comes down to the end. I don't know about you guys, but our picks would say we don't think that's going to happen. So we'll see. 2:30 start on Saturday afternoon down in Norman. ABC if you're not headed down there to see for yourself. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.